Welcome to the Golden Gems podcast. Today we're taking a deep dive into Daniel Ellsberg, the man who dismantled the logic of the Cold War secrecy state through the mechanics of a Xerox machine.
It really is a story about the machinery of the state. Not just the metaphorical machinery, but the literal gears. I mean, we usually think of Daniel Ellsberg as just the Pentagon Papers guy.
Right, the classic whistleblower.
Exactly. But looking at the source material we pulled together, that label it's almost too small. It actually misses the tragedy of the whole thing.
Because the narrative we usually get fed is so simple. Man leaks papers, stops the war, brings down Nixon.
Right.
But the reality we're exploring today is much darker. It's much more complex. We're really looking at a forensic dissolution of the imperial presidency. Ellsberg wasn't some outsider throwing rocks at the building.
No, he was inside.
He was the master engineer. He looked at the blueprints he helped draw and realized the structure wasn't built for defense at all. It was built for the extinction of the human species.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We need to trace that structural breakdown. We have to go from the high-level corridors of the Pentagon, where they were calculating death in the millions.
Literally mathematically calculating it.
Yes, down to a compost heap in upstate New York, where the actual smoking gun of the Cold War, the secret that was even bigger than the Pentagon Papers, was literally washed away by the rain.
That image of the compost heap, I mean, it's going to stick with me. But before we get to that ending, we have to understand the moral architecture of the man himself.
You really do.
You can't understand why someone risks 115 years in prison without understanding where they came from. The sources point to a very specific upbringing in Chicago, 1931.
It starts with his parents, Harry and Adele. They were of Jewish heritage but converted to Christian Science. And for you listening, if you're not familiar with it, Christian Science isn't just a box you check on a census form.
It's a highly rigorous theology.
Exactly. It's based entirely on mind over matter.
The idea that reality is shaped by spiritual understanding.
Right. And the sources note that this instilled a profound sense of moral absolutism in Ellsberg. It gave him this idea that truth wasn't just a fact or a data point. Truth was a spiritual force.
Even after he left the church.
Yes, even when he became a man of high academia and hard numbers, that early programming remained.
Yeah.
That the mind can reshape reality and that you have an absolute duty to the truth. That was his operating system.
And he definitely had the hardware for high-level processing. He goes to Cranbrook, graduates first in his class, and then heads to Harvard on a full scholarship to study economics.
But he wasn't studying money. He was studying how people make choices.
Which leads to what we call the Ellsberg paradox.
Yeah.
He wrote his PhD thesis on theories of decision-making under uncertainty. Now, in the 1950s, economics was becoming incredibly mathematical.
Very rigid.
The prevailing theory was that people are rational actors who weigh risks based on probability. But Ellsberg realized that's just not how human brains work.
He identified something called ambiguity aversion. Here is the core takeaway for you. People prefer a known risk to an unknown risk.
Right.
If I offer you a bet with a strict 50-50 chance, you might take it. But if I offer you a bet where the odds are a complete mystery, even if the math says the payoff is the exact same, you will back away.
We are wired to fear the fog more than the fire.
That is a brilliant way to put it.
Yeah.
And why does this matter for a guy leaking documents decades later? Because Ellsberg spent his career analyzing decision-making where the variables weren't poker chips.
There were millions of human lives.
Exactly. He was analyzing how presidents and generals make decisions in the fog of extreme uncertainty. He knew that when faced with ambiguity, leaders often make wildly irrational choices just to feel a sense of control.
And he didn't just theorize about this from an ivory tower. This is the part of his resume that always surprises people. He didn't stay at Harvard.
No, he enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1954.
He wanted to test himself against reality. He became a platoon leader and even extended his service to cover the Suez Crisis. The source specifically calls him a warrior scholar.
That distinction is crucial. When he later walked into the Pentagon or the Rand Corporation, he wasn't viewed as some soft academic who had never held a rifle.
He had commanded men.
He understood force at the tactical level. That credibility gave him the keys to the kingdom.
Let's talk about that kingdom, the Rand Corporation. In the late 50s and 60s, this wasn't just a standard think tank. The source calls it the Vatican of the nuclear age.
It really was. Located in Santa Monica, funded by the Air Force, windowless rooms. This was where the smartest men in America were paid to contemplate the unthinkable. Ellsberg joins in 1959.
His job was essentially to model the end of the world on a blackboard.
And this brings us to the absolute horror of SIOP 62, the single integrated operational plan. This seems to be the breaking point in his psychology.
He reviews the master war plan, and the numbers are just hard to process even now.
It was a blueprint for murder on an industrial scale. The plan called for a massive simultaneous nuclear strike on the Soviet Union and China if a conflict broke out.
Both of them. At the same time.
Yes. Ellsberg ran the numbers. He calculated the death toll from the blasts and the radioactive fallout. He estimated it would kill over 600 million people.
600 million. That was roughly a third of the Earth's population at the time.
And remember his thesis on ambiguity aversion. This is where the academic theory collided with the brutal reality. He realized this system wasn't a rational deterrent. It was, as he famously called it later, a doomsday machine.
Institutionalized insanity.
Exactly. He realized he was working for a system that had scientifically and mathematically planned the end of human civilization.
It's terrifying to think about the cognitive dissonance required to work there. You're in sunny Santa Monica, maybe catching a glimpse of the ocean, and then you walk into a windowless room and plan the incineration of a third of the planet.
That dissonance is exactly what started to crack his foundation. But the definitive break didn't happen at Rand. It happened in the field. In 1964, Ellsberg joins the Defense Department under John McNaughton.
And by 1965, he volunteers to go to Vietnam, and he's not doing the VIP tour.
He's not flying over in a helicopter at 5,000 feet. No, he spent 2 years in the dirt. He drove through provinces that the official reports back in Washington claim were completely secure and pacified.
Only to find them completely controlled by the Viet Cong.
He saw the corruption of the South Vietnamese government firsthand. He saw the absolute futility of the military strategy.
He was seeing the theoretical data points from his Harvard days turn into actual bodies.
And he realized the war wasn't just a mistake or a strategic blunder. He came to believe it was a crime. Meanwhile, back in Washington, the lying was systemic. And this is the origin of the Pentagon Papers.
Let's clarify what the Pentagon Papers actually were, because I think a lot of people forget. It wasn't just a pile of random memos.
It was an encyclopedic history. Defense Secretary Robert McNamara commissioned a top-secret study to document U.S. decision-making in Vietnam. It ended up being 47 volumes, 7,000 pages.
And Ellsberg was one of the researchers who had access to it.
He was. And what he found when he read the whole thing was that 4 presidents, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, and Johnson, had consistently lied to the American public about the war's origins and progress.
The key realization wasn't that they were trying their best and failing. It was that they knew they were failing and kept going anyway.
They knew it was unwinnable. That's the devastating takeaway from the sources. They kept escalating not to win the war, but to avoid the personal and political humiliation of losing it.
But knowledge alone wasn't enough to turn him into a whistleblower. He sat on that knowledge for a while.
You need a catalyst, a spark.
And that spark happened in August 1969 at Haverford College. Ellsberg is at a conference, and he hears a guy named Randy Keeler speak.
Randy Keeler. He's not a general. He's not a politician. He is a young draft resistor. He stands up in front of this crowd, announcing that he is about to go to federal prison for refusing to kill in Vietnam.
And this just destroys Ellsberg.
It breaks him wide open. The source material describes this incredibly cinematic moment. Ellsberg listens to this young man who has zero institutional power, but total moral clarity.
Right.
Ellsberg leaves the auditorium, finds a public bathroom, locks himself in a stall, and sobs for an hour.
I can just picture that. This high-level defense analyst, this warrior scholar who has coldly analyzed nuclear war, sobbing on a tile floor because he realizes his entire life has been built on a lie.
He realized that if Randy Keeler was willing to go to prison for refusing the draft, then he, Daniel Ellsberg, could go to prison for telling the truth.
He had to do something commensurate with the scale of the crime.
Exactly. The logic of the Doomsday Machine had to be broken, and he was the only one of the documents to break it.
So he decides to copy the papers, and this brings us to the mechanics of defiance. We live in a world of thumb drives and WikiLeaks now.
It's instantaneous today.
Right. If you want to leak something today, it takes 3 seconds. In 1969, leaking 7,000 pages was a physical nightmare.
It was tedious, dangerous manual labor. It started on October 1st, 1969. He was using a Xerox machine at an advertising agency owned by Linda Sinay.
Who was a friend's girlfriend.
Right, on Melrose Avenue in Los Angeles.
The logistics were wild. He'd smuggle the documents out of Rand in his briefcase, drive to the ad agency, copy them all night, and sneak the originals back into the safe in the morning.
Just imagine the physical weight of that. 7,000 pages. You're standing over a photocopier for hours, the light flashing, the smell of toner, and every single page you copy is a violation of the Espionage Act.
But here is the detail from the sources that always blows my mind. His family was involved.
It is controversial detail, but it speaks to how deeply personal this mission was. He brought his children. His 13-year-old son, Robert, helped feed the pages into the Xerox machine.
Unbelievable.
And his 10-year-old daughter, Mary, was there using scissors to cut the top-secret labels off the tops and bottoms of the copies.
A 10-year-old with scissors dismantling the American security state. That is an image you do not forget.
It was a full family operation. And the tension was very real. There was a moment when the police knock on the door because of a false alarm at the ad agency.
Right, the burglar alarm tripped.
Ellsberg and his son just froze. The police eventually left without searching the back room, but if they had walked in, history would be very, very different.
So he gets the papers copied. He tries to go through official channels first. He approaches Senators Fulbright and McGovern.
But they all get cold feet. They're afraid of the classification laws. They're afraid of the political fallout.
Which is a key point from the analysis. The legislative branch was paralyzed. The checks and balances had fundamentally failed. So he turns to the Fourth Estate. He contacts Neil Sheehan at the New York Times.
And after a massive secret hotel room verification process, the story breaks on June 13th, 1971.
Vietnam Archive. Pentagon study traces 3 decades of growing U.S. involvement. The Nixon administration must have absolutely lost their minds.
Fury is an understatement. Nixon hated the press, and he hated leaks. Attorney General John Mitchell obtained a temporary restraining order.
Prior restraint.
Yes. This was the first time in American history the federal government tried to stop a newspaper from printing a story before it hit the stands. They argued it was a grave threat to national security.
But Ellsberg didn't stop, and this is the relay system, which I think is a brilliant tactical move. The Times gets blocked, he goes to the Washington Post, they get enjoined, he goes to the Boston Globe.
He eventually hit 17 different newspapers.
He went underground for 13 days, moving from motel to motel. It was Hydra-headed defiance.
The government couldn't suppress the information because he decentralized the distribution. It was almost like an analog version of the internet. By the time he surrendered in Boston, the secret was completely out.
When he surrendered, he said, "I am prepared to accept the consequences." And those consequences were massive. He was facing 115 years in prison under the Espionage Act.
The trial in Los Angeles was intended to be a show trial. The government wanted to completely crush him. But this is where the story pivots from a tragedy to a farce and then to a victory.
Because the Nixon administration wasn't content with just a legal win, they wanted to destroy him personally.
Enter the plumbers.
The covert unit led by G. Gordon Liddy and E. Howard Hunt.
September 1971. They break into the office of Dr. Louis Fielding, Ellsberg's psychiatrist. They were looking for medical files to blackmail him, to paint him as mentally unstable.
They trashed the office to make it look like a robbery. It sounds like a bad spy novel.
It really does. But this extreme clumsiness is exactly what saved him.
It was the governmental misconduct that killed the case. During the trial, it came out that they had broken into the psychiatrist's office. Then it came out they had illegal wiretaps on Ellsberg.
And then the final blow. It was revealed that Nixon's aide, John Ehrlichman, had offered the presiding judge, Judge Byrne, the directorship of the FBI.
While the trial was actively happening.
Yes, during the trial.
They tried to bribe the judge with the FBI directorship. That is staggering arrogance.
It was. On May 11th, 1973, Judge Byrne had no choice. He dismissed all charges. He stated the government's conduct had incurably infected the prosecution.
Ellsberg walked free not because he was found innocent, but because the government was too corrupt to effectively prosecute him.
He beat the president. But the source material explicitly calls this a tragedy. And this is the twist that I think a lot of people just don't know about. There was a second secret.
Yes. This is the part that haunts me. When Ellsberg was copying the Pentagon Papers, he didn't stop there. He also copied thousands of pages regarding the nuclear war plan.
Yeah, the SIP.
He had the memos on first strike planning. He had the documentary evidence of the Doomsday Machine itself.
In Ellsberg's mind, the Pentagon Papers were actually the smaller leak. The Vietnam Papers were about a war that was killing thousands. The nuclear papers were about a plan to kill hundreds of millions.
He intended to release the nuclear papers after the Pentagon Papers trial was over, and he had given them to his brother Harry for safekeeping.
And Harry did what any protective brother would do in a state of sheer panic. He buried them.
He put them in a compost heap in his backyard in upstate New York. He marked the exact spot with a heavy iron stove so he could find them later.
And then, nature intervened.
A tropical storm hit in 1971. The area flooded.
The landscape of the backyard literally shifted. The stove moved. The compost heap was washed away.
That is unbelievable. The most dangerous documents in the world turned into mulch.
Ellsberg and his brother spent weeks digging up the yard with a backhoe. They found absolutely nothing. The documents were lost to the earth.
So the smoking gun of the ultimate crime, the plan to kill 600 million people, was just gone.
That is the real tragedy of Daniel Ellsberg. He spent the rest of his life warning about nuclear danger, but he had lost the documentary proof. He had seen the abyss, copied the map of it, and then lost the map.
He saved the history of the Vietnam War, but the history of the nuclear planning was erased.
Despite that massive loss, he didn't stop. He lived another 50 years as a relentless activist. The source draws a direct line from him to Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden.
He saw them as kindred spirits.
He famously said he would have done exactly what they did if he had the technology back then. He saw a direct lineage from his Xerox machine to their thumb drives.
He completely rejected the idea that he was the good leaker and they were the bad leakers. To him, it was all the exact same moral act, exposing the machinery of secrecy.
In 2017, he wrote the book The Doomsday Machine, trying to reconstruct those lost nuclear warnings from his own memory.
And right up until the end, he died in June 2023 from pancreatic cancer. He was sounding the alarm.
His final interviews were chilling. He was warning about the war in Ukraine, warning that we are closer to nuclear war now than at any time since the Cuban Missile Crisis. He used his dying breath to try to stop the machine one last time.
The source ends with this compelling concept of the vault. It's not a physical place, is it?
No. The vault is a moral challenge. It's a challenge to anyone holding a security clearance today. The fundamental question Ellsberg's life poses is this: does your loyalty lie with the agency that signs your paycheck, or does it lie with the human species?
It's a heavy question. It forces you to choose between your career and your conscience. And for you listening, it raises a provocative thought. In an era where information is instantly replicable and infinitely distributable, are we actually more transparent, or has the Doomsday Machine just gotten better at hiding in plain sight?
Ellsberg showed us that the machine relies on silence. It relies on good people saying nothing. He chose humanity. And while the machine repairs itself, building new walls and new classifications, he proved that a single individual, armed with the truth, can jam the gears.
The question isn't whether there will be another Daniel Ellsberg. The question is whether we will listen when they arrive. Thank you for listening to the Golden Gems podcast. We'll be back next time with another deep dive. Until then, keep exploring, keep listening, and keep celebrating the power of uncompromising voices.